Hey guys, picture this. You're in a dusty attic, surrounded by cobwebs that are way too cozy like if dust bunnies were a home decor choice. You stumble upon an old, yellowed letter that smells like bad decisions and your great Aunt Edna's perfume. Before you read it, I want you to hit that like button if you're ready to uncover some scandalous secrets that could rival any rom-com plot twist. Now, grab a snack and dim the lights, because this is going to get juicy. You feel your heart race as you realize this letter holds a secret love story that could change everything you thought you knew about your family, sort of like discovering your dad was once a boy band heartthrob. So, who's ready to dive into a world of forbidden romance and outdated social norms? Let's get into it. In the heart of Elder Grove, where the sun dripped golden nectar upon the whispering leaves, Alara thrived amidst her lush sanctuary of herbs and flowers. With the aroma of crushed mint tickling her nose, and the gentle hum of bees humming their own little symphonies, she found peace that the village bustle could never provide. Who would have thought that this serene garden, with its vibrant blooms, would also be the meeting ground for an illicit love? Ah, but therein lay the irony. As much as she adored her earthy refuge, it was here, among the greens and browns, that her heart danced for a man she could not claim. Lysander, the dashing son of the mayor, was not merely the handsome prince of the village. He was a living, breathing plot twist in her otherwise predictable life. Meanwhile, in the hallowed halls of the mayor's estate, Lysander felt like a bird caught in a gilded cage, beautiful yet stifling. The weight of his father's expectations pressed down like a leaden cloak, dimming his spirit, while Alara's free spirit shone brightly in his mind. Oh, if only the villagers could see him now, hunched over parchment at a desk, battling the burdens of protocols and nobility like a wannabe knight in shining armor dealing with bureaucracy. There was no manual for a love like his, a love that blossomed like wildflowers in a brick courtyard, vibrant but deemed unsuitable. Yet, when he thought of Alara, a flicker of rebellion ignited in his heart, shattering the fragile constraints of his upbringing. The pivotal moment arrived one fateful afternoon when Alara stumbled upon an exquisite letter hidden beneath the roots of an ancient oak, its parchment aged and crumbling like old cheese. She recognized the familiar scrawl, each word brimming with passion and regret, penned by Lysander's hand. The exhilaration was an electric current coursing through her veins, and she could almost hear the rustling leaves cheering her on. But with each word, a sense of dread coiled in her stomach like a snake preparing to strike. Secrets brewed in the shadows, and this letter was a lit fuse. It breached the walls of their silent pact, igniting hope, yet trailing danger in its wake. A perilous dance between desire and social retribution. Feeling both exhilarated and terrified, Alara clutched the letter to her chest, like a holy relic that might burn her if she held it too close. Could she dare to pursue a love that society had deemed taboo, like trying to sneak a cat into a dog show? Yet, with the faint sense of honeysuckle and earth swirling around her, she felt emboldened. Life was too short to let customs dictate her heart's rhythm. Little did she know, danger lurked around every corner, with curious eyes lining the streets of Elder Grove. Whispers of scandal drifted through town like smoke signals, and a love letter was the spark that could light the whole village ablaze with gossip and outrage. As Alara and Lysander's unseen bond began to unravel, the stakes grew higher than a medieval tower in Elder Grove's center square. Torn between the intoxicating allure of love and the suffocating grip of his noble duties, Lysander found himself tiptoeing on a tightrope of emotions, each step perilously closer to public fallout. Their secret rendezvous turned into a dance on the edge of a precipice, where one misstep could send them plummeting into the abyss of social disgrace. Still, thrill shot through them like lightning as their hearts thrummed in unison, oblivious to the dangers that loomed in the shadows. For in that small, twisting village, love may very well be the most dangerous game of all. And Alara and Lysander were just getting started. In the heart of the quaint village, as evening curtain lights played on rooftops, Alara found solace in the secret warmth of Lysander's presence. Their connection blossomed like wildflowers in spring, vibrant and alive, leaving a trail of stolen glances and hushed laughter in its wake. Yet, like shadows creeping over sunlit fields, whispers began to pierce through the delicate fabric of their joy. With every shared secret and brush of hands, the specter of societal norms loomed large, casting a pall over their impassioned escapades. It was as if the fates were playing a cruel game of chess. Every romantic move met with an equally brutal counterplay from the world around them. Alara's heart raced like a runaway stallion when she overheard a snatch of conversation at the market, where gossip ran thicker than porridge on a cold winter's day. "Have you heard? Lysander is to be engaged to the heiress of Fortwick Manor," one villager chattered, her voice laced with the kind of juicy scandal that could split a church congregation in two. The words hit Alara like a bucket of ice water. Suddenly, visions of her cherished moments with Lysander felt impossibly distant, as if they belonged to another life. A wealthy heiress, polished and empire-building, was about to plunge the knife of societal expectation deep into the tender heart of their burgeoning love. It was an uninvited twist in a narrative she had only dreamed of writing alongside her beloved. Frustration bubbled within Alara like a cauldron poised to boil over. as she strolled through the village, with unshed tears burning her eyes, refusing to fall. The scent of fresh bread mingled with the earthy aroma of recent rain, a reminder of comfort in a world that seemed intent on ripping her apart. Each face she encountered, once familiar and friendly, now morphed into a painting of judgment, their gazes piercing her like daggers. Even the crows perched high above seemed to caw her heartache, their raucous cries echoing her inner turmoil. The weight of duty felt like shackles around her ankles, tying her to a life prescribed by generations of unwritten rules, while the flame of desire flickered stubbornly against the wind. Elara longed for the freedom to choose love over obligation, a wish that nestled in her heart like a rebellious teenager yearning for independence. Lysander, the charming rogue whose laughter was sweeter than the nectar of summer blooms, was everything the village did not approve of, poor, passionate, and impossibly real. It was like trading a golden ticket for a chancy joyride on a dilapidated bus, romantic, exciting, yet with no guarantee of a happy ending. Yet, amidst the shouts of adversity, she could almost hear the sweet sounds of their shared laughter cutting through the air, as if daring the world to challenge their bond. But the harsher reality loomed. Who, in a world ruled by wealth and status, would choose a love deemed unworthy over the prospect of stability? Now caught in the tangled web of heart and duty, Elara faced the most excruciating choice of all. Should she swallow her love and wear the mask of engagement, or would she dare to defy the edifice of societal expectations, with every heartbeat echoing a silent prayer for guidance? She knew that Lysander was her true north. Yet, in this medieval soap opera of nobility and intrigue, how could they plot their escape when every path seemed riddled with brambles of regret? As laughter faded into distant memories, she inhaled the rich scent of possibility that danced through the air. Could they leap into the unknown, arms outstretched like adventurers seeking a destiny all their own? With one last longing glance toward the horizon where dreams were woven, Elara steeled her resolve, ready to write a new ending with her own ink. The night air was thick with tension, a palpable charge hanging over the small town like a thunderstorm waiting to break. Elara stood under the crooked branches of an ancient oak, her heart drumming an anxious tattoo against her ribs. The world seemed to hold its breath as she faced Lysander, her dark eyes awash with fire and fury. That letter, the one you thought was lost to time and shame, is more than just parchment and ink. It's a lifeline, a promise we must not let slip away. She exclaimed, her voice a mix of hope and desperation. The stars twinkled like uninvited witnesses in this clandestine meeting, as if they too were rooting for a happy ending to materialize under their watchful gaze. Lysander's breath hitched in his throat, the weight of her words settling upon him like a snowdrift creeping over a heated hearth. Just moments before, he had been poised to step into a gilded cage, poised to fulfill his family's legacy by marrying into the wealthy confines of the town's elite. But now, face to face with Alara, the air thick with unspoken desires, he felt the chains of obligation dissolve, a concept as absurd as trying to fit a unicorn into a Volkswagen. They shared a night that danced on the edge of rebellion, their laughter rising to the canopy of stars like fireworks on the 4th of July, illuminating their souls in vivid bursts of longing and defiance. As the moon rose high, casting silvery trails across their entwined forms, the heaviness of fate began to settle around them once more. Just then, like a character straight out of a soap opera, the mayor's thunderous voice boomed across the yard, slicing through the tenderness of their secret rendezvous. Lysander, he bellowed, a man whose ego was only rivaled by his disdain for anything passionate or spontaneous, particularly when it involved his son's heart. The shock of his father's intrusion felt like a cold bucket of water, a reality check drenched in dread and disappointment. Lysander's joy began to crack under the pressure, a tapestry that threatened to unravel at any moment with the slightest tug. The mayor's threats were calculated and cruel, every word designed to instill doubt in a son caught between the devil and the deep blue sea. If you pursue this, a mere whim of passion, you'll be disowned, left with nothing but your empty dreams and a diaries full of regret. Alara could sense the helplessness radiating from Lysander as he stood, a statue of indecision, battling the tumult within his chest. The weight of family loyalty had rarely felt this heavy. It pressed down on his shoulders like a set of old, dusty textbooks, laden with history and expectations. Lysander's heart raced in response to the dilemma, his spirit torn like a favorite t-shirt, one that once fit perfectly, but now felt snug and unyielding. As the final echoes of the mayor's ultimatum receded into the night, Alara reached for Lysander's trembling hand, their fingers intertwining with an electric spark. This moment, charged with melancholy and hope, would either ignite a daring escape or flame out into bitter resignation. "Choose love, not obligation," she whispered, every syllable wrapped in vulnerability, vibrating with the essence of their shared secret. With their hearts unified under the vast universe, they stood poised at the edge of their own destiny, ready to cast their lot against the fates that sought to bind them. And in that whispering night, as the stars bore witness, the future shimmered with possibility, as exhilarating as a roller coaster ride, a thrilling yet terrifying plunge into the unknown. The grand engagement ceremony unfolded in a splendor of colors. Laughter bubbling through the air as villagers adorned in their finest garments gathered in the town square. Bright banners fluttered like excited birds overhead, announcing the union of Lysander, and a prize he would likely not notice as his heart pounded in his chest, not for the anticipated bride, but for Alara, his moonlit enchantress. As laughter erupted and sweet wines flowed, it felt like a scene straight out of a fairy tale, until the moment Lysander, amidst the clinking goblets and intoxicating aromas of roasted meats, tore apart the fabric of expectation with a voice that rang clear like a bell cutting through the din. He proclaimed his love for Alara, igniting gasps that rippled through the crowd, the turmoil like a gust of wind that sent skirts swirling and hearts racing in disbelief, like a rogue knight shifting the plot. He had defied not just the script written for him, but stoked the fire of a drama that was only beginning to unfold. Chaos erupted like a bubbling cauldron as whispers turned into shouts, accusations swirling around Alara like a tempest. Eyes wide with shock and anger, some cast rigorous glances, while others, like scavengers sensing a feast, edged closer to witness the unraveling of a young woman, once a pillar of their quaint community, now oddly painted as a witch by her rival. The insults hung in the air, thick and suffocating. They wafted like the smell of burnt bread from a bakery new to the craft, unpleasant, yet oddly intriguing to watch. As Alara stood there, shoulders taut and jaw set, the heat of their scrutiny felt like a bonfire, mercilessly intense. The scent of fear mixed with betrayal filled her lungs as she tried to find Lysander's familiar face through the horde of accusatory glares. Her heart racing not just from the chaos, but from the budding dread that this could unravel everything they had built together. With mounting tension, Lysander found himself standing at a precipice, his heart split in two, each side urging him toward a different path. On one hand lay the glittering castle of privilege and power, the tinkle of his house's silver bells, and the power to command loyalty with a snap of his fingers, an enticing offer for any nobleman. On the other lay Alara, the sun in his cloudy skies, a woman caught in the storm of jealousy, helpless and betrayed. His whole world seemed to pause, the air thick with the tasting bitterness of decisions weighing heavily like a stone upon his chest. Would he trade his princely prospects for the whimsical, unpredictable magic of love that had caught him off guard, whispering sweet promises against the backdrop of societal norms? The laughter of the crowd faded into apprehensive silence as he faced the monumental decision, a true plot twist, worthy of a Shakespearean drama or a cheesy rom-com where the dude always gets the girl. Right. In a moment that felt both infinitesimal and eternal, Lysander took a breath, a sharp intake of the turmoil surrounding them, and then he stepped forward, each footfall like the drums of a march toward destiny. I will not forsake her, he declared, his voice loud enough to be heard above the rising tumult, echoing into the hearts of those who doubted the purity of their love. The murmurs that had once boiled around Alara began to simmer, and disbelief turned to astonishment as they processed the depth of his commitment. In that instant, Lysander chose to lay aside his title, freeing himself from gilded constraints and swapping them for the raw, rich tapestry of true affection. As he reached for Alara's hand, the weight of their gazes combined, uniting them against the fury of the masses. And just like that, love transformed chaos into possibility. A real-life magic spell born from the ashes of turmoil. As they stood together against the backdrop of the swaying crowd, a silence fell, almost reverent, as the whispers began to fade into the warm, earthy smells of autumn. It was as if time had decided to pause and take a long, deep breath, allowing them a fleeting moment of serenity amidst the storm. Who knew love could ignite such fervor, turning a festive occasion into a battlefield? Alara's heart leaped, both in joy and bewilderment, feeling the warmth of Lysander's hand and the fierce determination burning in his eyes. Could love truly be powerful enough to overcome the grisly threats of betrayal and envy? As the first cries of protest began again, she squeezed his hand tighter, the strength of her love fueling the hope that maybe, just maybe, they could vanquish the darkness together. As dawn broke over Eldergrove, the sky was painted in hues of pink and gold, like someone had spilled an artist's palette across the horizon. Alara stood at the window, her chestnut hair catching the early light, while Lysander packed their meager belongings, what little remained after the storm that had swept through their lives. They were leaving the shadows of a town that had witnessed their struggles, their laughter, and once, even their tears. Now it lay behind them like a distant memory, sweet yet haunting, much like that one time a neighbor's cat had knocked over her prized baked goods at the county fair, a disaster in frosting and fur that still made Alara chuckle with disbelief. With every step away from Eldergrove, she felt the heavy weight of the past lifting, as if they had finally found a way to cut the strings that tied them to their haunting history. Like a magician pulling off a daring escape from a glittering water tank. With just minutes left to breathe, no pressure, right, they journeyed to a forgotten stretch of land, wild and unkempt, filled with the scent of damp earth and fragrant wildflowers, each breath a promise of new beginnings. Together, they envisioned a sanctuary a haven for the unloved and misunderstood, where feelers could find comfort in shared tales of heartache and hope. Alara's imagination ran rampant like a horse that had just been set free, thumping hooves and wild, flowing monnets, a rare breed of hope that flourished where a flock of sad stories had once taken flight. They decided to name it Havenwood, a place where misfits could gather over steaming cups of cocoa and croissants, swapping tales of woeful breakups and romantic blunders as iconic and cringeworthy as any teen rom-com. Who knew a place dedicated to the broken-hearted could be so sweetly poignant, resembling a fusion of the Breakfast Club and one of those old-timey aid exhibits that gathered dust in the corners of our lives. With calloused hands, Lysander transformed that wild patch into a flourishing refuge. Imagine Bob Ross if he had gone a bit rogue and picked up a chainsaw instead of a paintbrush. The sound of his laughter echoed through the thickets, while Alara planted trees, her fingers digging into the cool, moist earth like a kid building the ultimate mud pie, raking in the satisfaction with every rooted sapling. They coaxed life from the land, drawing in creatures great and small, from rabbits with twitching noses to an eccentric blue jay that seemed to swoop down just to critique their handiwork. Each newly sprouted flower was a symbol not just of the past they were leaving behind, but of the dreams they dared to sow, whimsically blooming, each petal a witness to the liberty of forming something beautiful from heartbreak. They were building not just a sanctuary, but an experience, a destination for the spirit of misfits, miscreants, and let's face it, romantics clumsily adorned with glittery hope. As the first guests arrived, Alara and Lysander peeked out from behind the weathered doors of Havenwood, hearts pounding like a drum, ready for a parade celebrated post-downtown explosion. It was a motley group, with tales so varied they could have woven a tapestry thick enough to drape over any cast of quirky characters. You had the broken-hearted poet clutching crumpled sonnets, a philosopher who seemed to have found love only in his expansive collection of vintage books, and a couple who welcomed stormy weather with open arms. They gathered under a canopy of stars and string lights, the flickering kind that whispered secrets in a language only the night understood, over cheese boards that threatened to topple under the weight of assorted emotions. Between mouthfuls of laughter and the clinking of mismatched cups, Lysander and Alara shared their own story, a heartfelt comedy of errors that turned into a fairy tale with a touch of mischief. The letter that had once been their anchor in despair now sat in an ornate frame, a quirky reminder that true love sometimes arrives with crooked edges and bewildering tangents. A bit like a rom-com blooper reel, left rolling after the credits as the sun set each day and the glow from Havenwood spilled into the evening, Alara couldn't help but acknowledge how far they had come. Their sanctuary became a beacon, like the lighthouse on the cusp of a treacherous cliff, but without an ominous foghorn warning away love-struck sailors guiding the lost and the weary home. Each smile exchanged, every yawn after a long day, and the warmth from shared stories stitched together, a patchwork quilt of community in which everyone played a starring role. Through trials and tribulations, the letter morphed into more than a mere piece of paper. It was now a symbol of resilience, palatable, like homemade pie baked fresh from the oven, soothing and savory, with an irresistible story folded inside. They created not just a place, but a movement, a reminder that when we gather to embrace our broken pieces, somewhere, somehow, amidst the shared chaos and laughter, we can rediscover the joy of love that never truly leaves. In the splendid kingdom of Eldoria, where golden tapestries danced in the breeze like joyous spirits, an invitation flittered through the air, wrapped in an air of majesty. The royal ball at the palace was a spectacle to behold, filled with the promise of elegant gowns swishing and the mingling sounds of laughter and clinking goblets echoing through the marble halls. The whispers of anticipation carried on the currents of sweet perfume and fragrant florals. Yet, amid the revelry, one sentiment simmered with quiet intensity, the longing gaze of Sir Aidan, a noble knight sworn to protect his realm, where every heartbeat seemed to thrum with unspoken words for the captivating Princess Alara. Like a scene pulled from a romance novel, his heart felt the weight of both duty and desire, twirling around his chest as tightly as a corset on a ballroom dance floor. As preparations unfolded for the grand ball, laughter rang out, punctuated by the sizzling sounds of kitchen fires and the clattering of crystal goblets being polished, until they sparkled like the stars above. Sir Aidan, lost in his thoughts, considered the way Princess Alara's laughter lit up the dark corners of the kingdom, a twilight spark even the darkest souls couldn't ignore. However, the air of festivity was tinged with a troubling rumor, the tantalizing notion that Alara's heart may already belong to another, a mysterious courtier known only as Lord Dante. With a name that rolled off the tongue like fine wine, Dante was wrapped in an enigmatic charm, fostering whispers laden with jealousy and intrigue. Meanwhile, Aidan's stomach churned hotter than a dragon's breath. He felt a weight that no amount of armor could lift. The night of the ball arrived, and the castle shimmered under the canopy of stars, every window aglow, as though the palace itself were a jewel plucked from the night sky. Dance melodies floated through the air, a symphony of violins that seemed to flirt between the sensual and the silly, occasionally prompting unintended jiggles from the noble guests. Aidan, ever the dutiful knight, found himself caught in a swirling mix of excitement and fear. His glance locked onto Alara, who wore a gown as azure as the ocean's depths, capturing glimmers of light that would make a peacock sulk in envy. As she laughed with her guests, the light of mischief twinkled in her eyes, and Sir Aidan's heart faltered. There was no other sound in the world that held quite the same enchantment. But then, with the grace of a cat burglar, Lord Dante materialized, weaving through the throng with an effortless charm that sent Aidan's heart plummeting into the depths of despair. The dance floor, a mosaic of swirling silks and bouncing curls, became a battleground where friendship, loyalty, and desire clashed like knights in heavy armor. Aidan twirled about, his sword not of steel, but of hope, and he threw himself into the festivities, trying to divert his gaze from the dazzling dew stealing his spotlight. However, with every twirl and laugh shared between Alara and Dante, Aidan felt the delicious sting of jealousy wrap around him, a cruel companion of longing. Their flirtatious exchanges, filled with enough chemistry to spark a fireball in an ice cream parlor, crackled across the crowded ballroom, and Aidan couldn't help but feel more like an extra in a tragicomedy than a leading man. What was that old saying? Behind every great love story is a wretched poet pining in the shadows. At that moment, Aidan would have given anything for a shady corner and a bottle of something strong. Yet, beneath the layer of sparkle and veneer that adorned the ball, an undercurrent of tension flowed like a hidden river, threatening to unearth secrets that could shake the very foundations of the kingdom. Whispers flew through the glittering crowd like mischievous sprites, hinting at romances that twisted and turned like careless silk threads in the tapestry of court life. And as Aidan watched from the sidelines, he understood that the royal invitation was not merely a call to dance and drink, but a summons that would inevitably unravel the elaborate threads of loyalty, love, and perhaps betrayal. The figures on the dance floor became mere pawns in a much larger game, where the stakes were not just power or status, but the hearts of those who walked the cunning tightrope of courtly love. Little did they know, the confessions lurking in the shadows would soon threaten to shake the very essence of Eldoria, one secret romance at a time. The grand ballroom sparkled under a canopy of golden chandeliers, their crystals refracting light like 1,000 tiny prisms. As the music swelled, couples swirled across the polished floor, a kaleidoscope of colorful gowns and tailored coats. Aidan locked eyes with Alara from across the crowd, her laughter ringing like silver bells amidst the cacophony of joyous chatter. Each flirtatious glance and sly smile sent butterflies fluttering in his stomach. But a dark cloud hung ominously above him, the ever-present shadow of Lord Dante. The man was about as welcome as a pestilent rat in a banquet hall, constantly lurking, his intentions as clear as mud under a midnight sky. Aidan could feel the tension coiling tighter in his chest, an unwelcome guest at a celebration meant for love and revelry. Desperate for clarity and sanity, Aidan pulled his closest confidant, Lady Isolde, aside, her keen eyes scanning the room like a hawk's. Her auburn hair glinted like a freshly polished apple under the flickering candelabras, and her sharp mind was legendary among the court. "You see that smarmy toad, Dante," he whispered, his voice barely rising above the jubilant melody. Isolde huffed, rolling her eyes as she conjured up an image of Dante's pompous grin. A face one could only love as far as they could throw it, which fortunately was quite far. "I've seen the way he looks at Alara. It's like he's eyeing the last piece of cake at a feast. And my dear Aidan, you are the cake," she said with a smirk, blending humor with a bitter truth that hung in the air like a thick fog. As Aidan observed from afar, he noticed Dante weaving his web of charm around Alara, his silver tongue spinning tales like a bard, but with the subtlety of a bull in a china shop. The way he leaned closer, whispering sweet nothings, made Aidan's blood boil, each syllable ringing like a death knell in his heart. It was infuriating to watch, a battleground of emotions unfurling in real time, each laugh from Alara a blade twisting in Aidan's gut. He felt like a parchment left too long in the rain, damp and fragile, words muddled and uncertain. The irony of the moment struck him hard. He had always understood love as an irresistible force. Yet here he stood, paralyzed by the very notion he cherished so deeply. Aidan's heart wrestled with fear, loyalty wrestling with the pit of jealousy that settled like stone in his stomach. The air thickened with tension as Aidan weighed his options. A king considering whether to play his last card in a game of chess. Would confronting Dante be a gamble worth taking, or would it merely send him spiraling into a royal dumpster fire? Aidan took a deep breath, the sweet scent of roses mingling with a hint of sweat from the crowded ballroom. An olfactory cocktail that would put any cocktail party to shame. To love is to dare, he thought, as he imagined finally claiming Alara in front of all their peers, declaring her as his with a flourish fit for the stage of Shakespeare. Yet the shadows of doubt crept in uninvited, whispering of betrayal, mistrust, and just how charming a rogue like Dante could be. The heart may be willing, but Aidan's resolve felt like a souffle before an audience, beautiful, but liable to collapse at any moment. With a newfound shimmer of determination, Aidan straightened his shoulders, prepared to either face Dante or embarrass himself spectacularly. He glanced one last time at Alara, the radiant vision who ignited a fire in him brighter than the chandeliers overhead. And that spark was what pushed him into the fray. As he strode across the polished marble floor, he could almost hear the ominous scores from a suspense film building with each step. Here we go, folks. A showdown that could make or break a kingdom. He thought wryly as he approached his rival, ready to barge into this duet with a single bass note of his own. The atmosphere crackled with unspoken tension, a dramatic play unfolding under the very noses of the oblivious nobles. Aidan may have been a mere pawn in their courtly game, but tonight he felt heroic, ready to flip the script, or at least toss a cherry bomb into the mix. In the hushed embrace of the moonlit gardens, where the silver glow danced upon dew-kissed petals, Alara wandered, half lost in her thoughts. The sweet scent of jasmine lingered, intoxicating the air as she leaned against the gnarled trunk of an ancient oak. Aidan, her heart's desire, stood close, his presence an electric charge that crackled through the night. With every glance, every laugh, their bond deepened, wrapping around them like the tendrils of ivy that clung to the garden walls. Little did she know, the confession that danced on her lips was destined to break like a dam, unleashing the flood of her hidden emotions into the cool night air, bewildering as a reality show reveal party gone awry. As the words slipped from her tongue, suffused with longing and breathless vulnerability, the world fell away. Aidan, she began, heart racing like a steed upon the road. But before she could declare her love, a shadow erupted from the darkness. Lord Dante burst forth like an overeager contestant on a dating show. The very air thickened with tension as he stood there, all pomp and preening, eyes gleaming like those of a dog spotting a juicy bone. I must interrupt this cosmic twinkle fest to proclaim my affections for you, Alara, he declared, chest puffed out, as if he had just solved the riddle of the Sphinx. Irony dripped from his words like condensation on a chilled goblet, completely unaware that his entrance had stolen not just the moment, but potentially Alara's heart altogether. Alara's face flushed, not just from the surprise, but from the absurdity of it all. She might as well have been caught lip-syncing to a romantic ballad with a hairbrush as her microphone. Really, Dante, she thought, both amused and horrified, as the moon launched a sarcastic wink her way. But the true threat lurked beneath his grandiose proclamations. Reputations were like porcelain, delicate and easily shattered, and Lord Dante promised to wield the power of scandal like a sledgehammer if Aidan dared to stand in his way. Aidan, standing by, felt the weight of exaggerated expectations settle upon him. as if an anvil had been dropped from a cliff. His dreams of love now danced perilously close to the edge of ruin, the stakes rising higher than the castle's turrets against the night sky. Aiden's heart raced, caught in the crossfire of unspoken feelings and impending doom. He could practically hear the distant whispers of the court, skittish as a pack of mice upon a cat's entrance, each one speculating about a scandal that could render even the purest love a tarnished relic. Lord Dante, reveling in the moment like a spoiled child at a birthday bash, seemed determined to turn their blossoming romance into a public spectacle, one that would make tabloid headlines look like nursery rhymes. Yet inside, Aiden steeled himself, a resolve growing stronger than an iron chain. He refused to let this pompous lord extinguish the spark that had ignited between him and Alara, even if it meant engaging in a duel of wits, swordplay, or perhaps an impromptu dance-off to the last breath of air in that garden. Amidst this storm of emotion and rivalry, the garden pulsed with the sound of rustling leaves, whispered secrets, and the occasional nightingale's melancholy song, a fitting backdrop to this burgeoning drama. Alara stood torn between laughter and tears, their shared moments swirling in her mind like fireflies in the dusk. What had started as a quiet confession now unfurled into a tapestry of heart-pounding tension and vibrant rivalry, each thread bright with the promise of love and treachery alike. Aiden's voice would for once break through, slicing through the air with a determination that could rival a knight's battle cry, calling Alara back from the brink of indecision. And as they faced this chaos together, laughter mingled with passion, each heartbeat reverberating like the drum roll of fate, daring them to gamble on love amidst the court's watchful eyes. In the grand hall of the palace, the air crackled with tension, thick enough to slice with a sword, or perhaps, more fittingly, a javelin of sarcasm. Nobles in their finest silks fidgeted, eyeing the two rivals as if they were a flame, or a particularly intense Netflix drama. There was Aiden, partly a knight, and mostly a mess of flaring emotions. And then there was Dante, smooth as a freshly polished suit of armor, but with a dagger of betrayal poised beneath his charm. The scent of fresh bread mingled with the musty odors of sweat and desperation, painting a portrait of valor tinged with the absurd, like a Renaissance fair gone terribly wrong. Each noble whispered rumors like they were trading baseball cards, hoping the spectacle would be worth more than their investments in boredom for the day. The sun blazed overhead, a golden eye glaring down as Aiden stood firm, drawing his sword like a magician, unveiling his final trick. It glinted ominously, showcasing his determination as he glanced at Alara, her eyes a storm of uncertainty and fierce hope. Each heartbeat echoed like a war drum in his chest, resonating with the depth of their love. A truth so radiant it felt like a beacon against the dark clouds of jealousy. As the knights gathered for the duel, a cacophony of clanging steel and hollers erupted, and it felt like the world outside twisted into a 90s action movie, something between a gladiatorial fight and a particularly enthusiastic episode of Game of Thrones. Sans the dragons, of course. Yet here was Aiden, entrenched in this battleground, fighting not just for honor, but for the tender romance tucked away in the shadows of royal courts, making it all the more disheartening that it had led to this blood-stained stage. The clash of swords rang through the hall, creating a symphony of chaos that echoed within the marble walls. It was a vivid tapestry of fury spun by skilled hands, where iron met iron with a fierce crack, sending sparks flying like fireworks, celebrating the 4th of July. Each swing and parry uncorked an anguish that had been simmering in the heart of the kingdom. Aiden felt the grit of the dusty floor beneath his feet, the taste of iron in his mouth mingling with adrenaline as he recalled Alara's laughter, the way her hair danced like sunlight on water, and how those moments felt almost worth fighting the devil himself. And there he stood, embodying both courage and folly, a romantic hero brewed from the finest blend of invincible spirit and naive idealism, completely oblivious that love in royal courts often ended with shards of broken hearts littering the ground. As the duel reached its fevered climax, Aiden's muscles screamed with exertion, and a raw sense of urgency propelled him forth like an electric charge. With one final, desperate lunge, he brought his sword down, stunning Dante and claiming the victory amidst a shocked hush that fell over the crowd, as if someone had hit pause on the universe. Cheers erupted, a clamor of jubilation crashing against the walls like a tidal wave, but they seemed to wash over Aiden in an unsettling way. He had won, yes, but the victorious heft felt curdled, like milk left out on a summer's day, when all he wanted was to bake a victory cake. As if on cue, Alara rushed to him amidst the throng, her eyes wide with a mixture of pride and fear. And Aiden realized that the journey to love often waded through rivers of pain, leaving footprints that may never wash away completely. Staring into the eyes of victory, Aiden felt a heavy truth settle over him like a dark cloak. The price of triumph was steep, a currency measured in hearts and secret whispers. The cheers faded into a haunting whisper of a bittersweet serenade as he pondered the chaos he had just created, the enmity unveiled, the relationship strained, and the irony that his win had only confirmed the fragile fragility of love in a gilded world. A new understanding washed over him, harder to grasp than a dragon's egg, that the moment of glory often stood at the precipice of loss. Alara stood there, radiating beauty, yet shrouded in the somber weight of reality, a reminder that winning meant facing more than just foes. With love comes sacrifice, an unending dance between heart fires and the icy grip of deception. And so, under the glittering chandeliers of victory, Aidan vowed to treasure their love while navigating the labyrinthine courts of his heart and the kingdom. Still uncertain if he'd come out clean or covered in royal muck. Picture, if you will, the grand hall of Elysium Castle, aglow with flickering torches, casting dancing shadows upon the stone walls. A heavy tension clung to the air, thick enough to cut with a sword, as Alara stepped forward, her heart pounding a wild rhythm against her chest. In that moment, amidst the whispers and glances that ricocheted through the court like arrows, she drew a deep breath, the faint scent of wax and polished wood filling her lungs, and declared her love for Aidan. A collective gasp rippled through the gathering, a cacophony of delighted gasps and strangled chortles. Who said that the court was devoid of romance? Here was a tale that made for the best gossip of the season, a love forged in the chaos of blood and betrayal, straight out of a bard's good graces, and perhaps a rom-com script from Hollywood's finest. With those words hanging in the air like an intoxicating spell, Alara and Aidan felt an exhilarating surge of hope and defiance. Their hands intertwined, they faced not just the watchful court, but the shadows of deceit left by the treacherous Dante, the dark puppeteer behind the scenes. The smell of smoke from extinguished torches lingered in the air, a stark reminder of the duel they had just survived, a battle where swords clashed and shards of loyalty were tested. Yet amid that clamor, their hearts sung a different tune, a harmony that drowned out the court's less than pleasant murmurs. Aidan grinned, a boyish twinkle in his eyes, matching the fierce resolve in Alara. Together, they would strip the masks from Dante's deceitful face. Knots of secrecy intertwined in the grand tapestry of the kingdom, as whispers of scandal morphed into celebratory cheers. The couple's unity became a beacon of hope at a time when the kingdom was shrouded in darkness. Their secret romance, once hidden like an unsung song in the depths of a lute, now blossomed into an anthem of rebellion against tyranny. The court watched, their gazes a mix of envy and stunned admiration, as Alara and Aidan navigated the tumultuous waters of love and betrayal. Echoes of laughter mingled with the clinking of goblets filled with fine wine, releasing an aroma that was intoxicating yet oddly treacherous, like the fate of those entangled in Alara and Aidan's shared destiny. And oh, how deliciously ironic it was that in a kingdom rife with manipulation, their love story was now the very thing that turned the tide on fabrications once thought unshakable. But not all was sunshine and roses as the couple faced the impending storm of truth. Bravery has its price, especially in royal courts where loyalty was as fickle as a sheep caught in the wind. The fanged jaws of conspiracy loomed like a ravenous beast, eager for morsels of discontent to gnaw upon. With the stench of intrigue stale in their nostrils, Alara and Aidan braced themselves for the fallout. The castle seemed to hum with unsaid words and half-formed plots, a veritable cauldron bubbling with dissent, waiting for the right moment to erupt. And yet, despite the uncertainty, they pressed forward, Aidan's unwavering gaze locked onto Alara's, each glance a silent pact that promised they would confront the shadows together, wielding love like a sword, shining even against treachery's darkest blade. In the end, Alara and Aidan stood at the precipice of their destiny, their hearts entwined stronger than iron forged in the fiercest flames. As the kingdom braced itself for the revelations that would surely follow, they offered the court a narrative of resilience threaded with loyalty. The air was electric, crackling with an energy that both frightened and thrilled them, a promise that their love could weather any storm. In their hearts, they could almost hear the distant cheer of a crowd from some fantastical movie. Heroes flinging aside their fears, embodying the defiant spirit that even royalty couldn't diminish. Together, they would transform whispered scandal into a tale of triumph, proving once, and for all that love indeed was the strongest force of all, much mightier than the cruelest plots of an envious courtier. In the crumbling city of Eldara, where the air was thick with the acrid stench of smoke and despair, young Alara stumbled upon a dusty bundle of letters hidden deep within her late mother's belongings. The attic was a realm of shadows, the kind that made the hairs on the back of your neck stand at attention. Each letter was like a time capsule, waiting to expose secrets buried beneath the rubble of war. A motley collection of parchment papers, some yellowed and brittle, others still smelling faintly of lavender and nostalgia, whispered tales of romance. She could almost hear them breathe, like ghosts trapped in each crevice, longing to be freed from the dust of time. What started as a chore quickly morphed into an irresistible treasure hunt, offering a sweet escape from the grim realities of a city under siege, where each day felt like walking a tightrope over a chasm of uncertainty. Then she found the letter addressed simply to Elle. Its elegant cursive danced across the page, revealing a clandestine love affair between her mother and a soldier named Lysander. Not exactly the middle name one would expect of a gritty warrior, was it? The ink flowed with passion, recounting walks under starlit skies and whispered promises made in the sacred quietude of the night. The words dripped with a bittersweet nectar, mingling joy and heartbreak like the aroma of fresh-baked bread wafting through a war-ravaged cafe. Alara's pulse quickened with each sentence, her heart pounding like a drum in a battleground, caught between the allure of this newfound knowledge and the pangs of duty to a society demanding loyalty over love. In a world that seemed to turn its back on softness and vulnerability, how was she, a mere girl, to reconcile her newfound understanding with the expectations that weighed down like the heavy boots of soldiers marching to war? As she pored over the letters, Alara felt a swirl of emotions rise within her: the joy of discovery, the sorrow of her mother's hidden past, and, dare she admit, envy for the life her mother had led before the war rendered choices into mere fantasies. What was a girl to do with such revelations? Imagine her mother, a beacon of strength and duty, issuing the same quiet resilience with which Alara faced daily ration cards and roving bands of soldiers. The irony hit her like a misfired cannon. Here her mother had loved fiercely, yet managed to uphold a facade of brave stoicism for her family amid the chaos. In that attic, with every letter she read, Alara began crafting a silent rebellion against the suffocating expectations that nearly smothered her spirit, like trying to breathe underwater in a sea of duty. Alara's heart thumped like a distant war drum as she leaned against the crumbling stone wall of her home. The faint scent of burning wood wafting through the air mingled with the stench of desperation that hung thick in the war-torn town. The stories of Lysander, the dashing soldier cloaked in heroic tales, twisted and turned in her mind like a river caught in an unexpected storm. A handsome face, a courageous heart, and yet shackled by the heavy hand of societal expectations. He had buried his love deeper than any hidden cache of weapons. In her quiet hours, Alara pondered this paradox, just as one might ponder a treacherous path strewn with rose petals, sharp thorns lurking beneath the surface. What does love cost when duty reigns supreme? She mused, her thoughts echoing in the empty corners of her heart, yearning for answers that danced just out of reach. Meanwhile, the sound of Aaron's laughter rattled through Alara's memory like a mischievous imp. He was a local warrior, strong and true, with a spirit as fierce as the rising sun. Yet all she could think of was the unseen bond between him and her heart. There was a warmth there, a kindling flame that pushed against the icy grip of despair that war had cast upon her world. Alara could almost taste the smoke of battle on her tongue, but strangely, it only ignited her urge for something sweeter, something like love. just as the great bard once wrote, "All the world's a stage," and she felt her own script morphing, twisting into something grand, yet marred by the shadow of Lysander's hidden affection, leaving her longing for a leap into the unknown. The fateful decision echoed in her mind like a clanging bell. Seek out Lysander, the secret keeper of bygone hearts, and perhaps learn the truth of her mother's clandestine choices. The air became thick with determination, the tang of iron clashing in the recesses of her resolve. As she prepared to venture into enemy territory, a dangerous escapade that would make even Indiana Jones raise an eyebrow. With the weight of the forbidden letter clutched tightly in her hands, Alara donned a disheveled cloak, the fabric whispering secrets only the wind could understand. Every rustle and clank of her equipment felt like a loud confession in the stillness of the night. She breathed in the cool evening air, scented with the promise of adventure and the rustle of leaves, each step pulling her closer to a fate unknown. With the moon as her only ally, Alara wove through patterns of shadows, the world around her transformed into an eerie pantomime of lost souls and whispered hopes. The distant echo of drums signaled a nearby army's night practice, their fierce yelling and clashing swords resonating in her chest like thunder. Each heartbeat was a reminder of her fragile humanity amidst the brutality of war, a gory canvas where love was a painting too risky to take a chance on. She couldn't shake the bitter irony. Why was it that love became a casualty of battle, tattered like an overused flag? As she picked her way closer to the enemy camp, her pulse racing like a thief in the night, Alara felt the line between bravery and folly blur into a single, joyous leap that could very well end in heartbreak or wonder. And there, in the depths of the enemy's domain, with her breath hitching in her throat, Alara finally saw him. Lysander, the brave enigma, bathed in the flickering light of their campfires, his face hauntingly familiar, and yet foreign, a living testament of a heart trapped by its quest for honor. The weight of the letter felt like a tangible ghost, a spectral guide tugging her closer as emotions swirled fear like bitter ash, hope like sweet nectar, and an indescribable yearning that twisted her insides like a pretzel at an old carnival. The revelation struck her with the force of a cannonball. Love, even under siege, could flourish against all odds. That thought danced in her mind as the distance between them shrunk. Destiny poised to right itself anew, if only she dared to breach the quiet fortress of his heart and reveal the secrets their letters held. Here was her moment, a chance to embrace what had long been cloaked in shadows, love's defiance shining bold and bright in the night of war. The air crackled with tension as Alara stepped deeper into the war-torn landscape, her heart pounding like the drumbeats of battle echoing in the distance. Each rustle of grass sent shivers down her spine, reminding her that every shadow could hide an enemy ready to strike. The smell of smoke thickened in the air, mixing with the metallic scent of blood, a grim perfume that painted her reality in shades of despair. As the din of cannon fire rumbled like an angry sky, Alara couldn't help but think that if her mother were here, she'd probably knit a sweater out of worry. Yet, driven by love and determination, she pressed forward, navigating the minefield of chaos that divided loyalty from desire, duty from feeling. Just as the clouds of gunpowder began to settle, Alara stumbled upon a wounded soldier, his body propped against a battered tree. He looked like someone had tossed him into a wrestling match with an angry bear, mirthlessly peeling back the layers of his coat to reveal a grim sight. But it was his eyes, glazed and searching, that captivated her. "You're looking for news about Lysander, aren't you?" he rasped. And just like that, Alara's heart plummeted into her stomach with every word he uttered. It felt like reading a spoiler before finishing the last chapter of a tragic novel. Death, betrayal, and the faint glimmer of hope woven through his fragile breath. In those fleeting moments, Alara was a tempest of emotions, caught between the echoes of her family's rigid legacy and the burgeoning love she felt for Aaron that cast the past in shimmering light. She envisioned her mother's disappointed gaze, as if the matriarch could see Alara flirting with treason by harboring feelings for the enemy. The irony tickled her. War had turned them into what? Star-crossed lovers, the twilight zone of history. It was a ridiculous place for romance, and yet her heart whispered loudly amidst the chaos, urging her to choose love even as the ghosts of her lineage howled for her loyalty. With each step she took toward the front lines, danger crept like a shadow, every footfall heavy with the weight of 1,000 whispered warnings. Tales of spies lingered in the air like the aroma of burnt bread, nauseatingly familiar and painfully close to home. The wind carried hushed conversations and the rustle of hurried plans, weaving through the trees as if nature held its breath, waiting for the inevitable clash to unfold. It all felt like a scene from a crumbling epic, where heroes rarely triumphed and endings were as bitter as unsweetened dark chocolate. Alara grasped her cloak tighter, a protection not just against the elements, but against the biting reality that love and war rarely made good bedfellows. As dusk painted the horizon in crimson hues, Alara found herself at a crossroads, literally and metaphorically. The landscape unfurled before her like a twisted canvas, treacherous paths hidden amongst the debris of war that threatened to swallow her whole. The faint sound of laughter erupted from a nearby camp, an unexpected burst of humanity in the chaos, a reminder that life danced on dangerously thin strings. In that moment, amidst the suffering and sacrifice, Alara realized duty was only as heavy as one made it. Perhaps love could lighten the load. With her heart set ablaze by Aaron's memory and the promise of something deeper, she steeled herself for whatever lay ahead, ready to cross enemy lines in search of a love worth the risk. In the heart of the war-torn landscape, where the trees stood like skeletons against an ashen sky, Alara's heart raced with a mixture of fear and fervor. She zigzagged through the jagged remnants of battle, her breath hitching at every rustle of the wind, fearing it might carry bad news instead of her fervent hope. The makeshift camp was a pitiful sight, a patchwork of tattered cloth that barely shielded the wounded from the cold bite of night. Yet, amidst this disarray, there he was Lysander, nestled among the remnants of survival, awash in the pale light of a flickering lantern. His grim form was a canvas of bruises and bandages, but his eyes sparkled with a warmth that made the world outside momentarily fade away. Like an old sitcom laugh track, softening a harsh reality, Alara knelt beside him, her fingers trembling as she pressed the forbidden letter into his calloused hand. It was as if time folded in on itself, wrapping them in a bittersweet moment where dreams danced just out of reach. Memories of stolen afternoons spent beneath blooming cherry blossoms, crafting grand plans that now seemed like dusty relics. "Do you remember the bakery on Willow Street?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, filled with laughter and longing. Lysander's grin was slow, almost painful, as he recalled the aroma of fresh bread mingling with the sweet scent of hope, an ironic reminder that even the simplest joys had been ripped asunder by war. With each word, the distance created by their trials seemed to crumble like old parchment. Yet shadows of duty loomed heavily in the periphery, but the tranquility of nostalgia was shattered like glass when Aaron, Lysander's comrade and rival, emerged from the shadows, his presence electric with unspoken tension. The stench of sweat and earth clung to him, accentuating the fierce determination in his eyes as they locked onto Lysander's injured form. "You thought you could have her all to yourself. Huh," Aaron spat, muscles coiling like taut wires ready to snap. Their shared bond of duty twisted into something dark and combustible, as if the very air crackled with until now muted conflicts. The echo of cannons in the distance sounded like a drum roll, heralding a confrontation that felt as monumental as an epic showdown in a superhero movie, where loyalty is tested like a pair of old comic book pages. The atmosphere thickened with unsaid words, the the scent of gunpowder mixing with Alara's panic, creating a brew potent enough to drown hopes and dreams alike. As tempers flared and voices escalated, the sounds of clashing ideals resonated louder than the distant war, duty versus desire, sacrifice versus love. Alara begged them to stop, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife through butter. But this was a battlefield of the heart, and reason had retreated into a dark corner. Each man stood poised to fight, their postures mirroring a tense standoff in a classic spaghetti western, where a single tumbleweed could change the course of history. And as hearts thundered louder than cannons, choices hung in the air, heavy and pulsating, ripe with the potential for either tragic loss or life-affirming victory. In that fraught moment, Alara could feel the weight of their decisions, shaping the very fabric of their lives, like a historical twist in a Shakespearean play. 1,000 futures flashed before her, each one a thread unraveling the delicate tapestry of their shared past. Would Lysander cling to duty, sacrificing his own happiness for the sake of his country? Or would Aaron step aside to honor a love that had always been more than just a battle cry? The tension shifted like the tide, and one could almost hear the thrum of fate's drum, prompting action in that war-torn theater masked as a makeshift camp. With her hands trembling, not knowing if she was steering them toward salvation or destruction, Alara stepped forward, ready to break the chains of conflict and weave a new destiny amidst the ruins. The rumble of distant artillery felt like a grudging drumbeat in the back of Alara's mind, underscoring the turmoil of a world bathed in conflict. The acrid scent of smoky embers mixed with the sweet remembrance of her mother's letters, a poignant reminder of love stitched together amidst the carnage. Each word was a thread drawing Alara closer to the legacy of the woman who dared to love in the shadows, facing the harsh gaze of a society bound by duty. Determined not to be swept away by the tides of war, she planted her feet firmly in the soil of compassion, ready to cultivate a garden of understanding amid the ruins. I can't play the ghost of my mother forever, she thought, a wry smile creeping up as she imagined herself in a spangled superhero cape. No, Alara was no sidekick. She was the hero of her own saga now, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a fiery glow that rivaled a dystopian movie set. Alara set forth on her mission to collect the stories of those whose hearts had dared to dance dangerously close to the flames of forbidden love. She wandered the street markets, where vendors shouted their wares with the fervor of love-struck poets, their voices blending into a symphony of life amidst chaos. With each letter she gathered, tales surged forward, tales of secret rendezvous under the pallid moonlight. Hands clasped tightly, as if sharing an oath against the world. The laughter that punctuated those memories brought warmth to her chest, a stark contrast to the chill of the wind that whipped through the streets. Love is not a casualty of war, it is a rebellion, she declared in her mind, her voice igniting a spark of courage within her melting heart. Yet the weight of choice pressed down on her shoulders like a thick woolen blanket in summer, suffocating rather than comforting. Alara stood at a crossroads, not of roads paved with cobblestones, but of emotions tangled in the web of duty and desire. Lysander and Aaron, both etched firmly in her soul. On one hand, the steadfast Lysander embodied loyalty and resilience, an anchor in a stormy sea. On the other, Aaron's passionate spirit danced like fireflies on a warm summer's night, alive and vibrant, yet fleeting. In a moment of clarity tinged with irony, she realized she didn't have to choose. A true complexity of love could embrace both passions without succumbing to the confines of traditional narratives. Alara would craft a story as wild and unpredictable as the winds that roared through war-torn lands. Time, that relentless tempter, drew its breath into Alara's new life as a teacher and healer, her spirit a beacon of hope in a landscape ravaged by despair. Her classroom buzzed like a beehive, filled with children's laughter, sticky fingers, and unrestrained dreams bursting forth like dandelions through cracks in pavement. The air around her shimmered with possibility. Each lesson a fragile seed planted in the hearts of young minds, blossoming into kind words and understanding, a delightful irony, given how adults had often forgotten the art of kindness amidst the battlefield chaos. Each day she would haul in her treasure trove of forbidden letters, each one a testament to the power of connection in a world that had tried to sever it. Who knew love letters could be weapons for peace? She chuckled softly, her voice dancing between the sounds of learning and laughter. As twilight sprawled across the sky, splashed in hues of violet and gold, Alara felt the echoes of her mother's love vibrating in her very core, a melody harmonized with her own ambitions. She gently placed a hand upon a stack of letters, the scent of faded ink mingling with the warm glow of lanterns lighting her path. With every word she shared, with every story revealed, the ripples of compassion spread outward, weaving threads of connection that defied the somber backdrop of war. In this tapestry, there was resilience, laughter, everything that made even the darkest nights feel edged with silver. Alara closed her eyes, a smile dancing on her lips, trusting that in nurturing love, she was intertwining her fate with that of countless others, echoing through the hollowed chambers of a war-torn world. In the picturesque village of Eldridge, where the cobblestone streets whispered tales of yore, Alara found herself in the attic of her late grandmother's cottage, sneezing from dust that had settled like a thick blanket over forgotten treasures. The musty smell of old books mixed with the faintest hint of lavender lingered in the air, a fragrant reminder of the past. Buried beneath faded quilts and rusty trunks, she discovered a weathered diary, its leather cover cracked like dried-up riverbeds, radiating a mysterious energy that tugged at her timid heart. Intrigued, she brushed the dust away, revealing a title that seemed to shimmer even in the dim light. The Chronicles of Actaeon, the Brave. Little did she know, this was the moment that would change everything. Her very own plot twist waiting to unfold like a Disney movie, minus the catchy songs, at least for now. As she flipped open the diary, the musty scent intensified, releasing a swirl of memories and adventures trapped within yellowed pages. Words spilled forth like excited children on a playground, recounting the daring escapades of a heroine whose courage made even the likes of Wonder Woman seem like she just got off the couch to grab some snacks. Each entry painted vivid pictures of grand quests and heart-pounding battles, sending shivers down Alara's spine and igniting a fire deep within her heart, a fire that whispered, "Why not you, Alara?" Such bravery felt foreign, like a fish trying to ride a bicycle, which, as anyone knows, is not only dangerous, but also utterly ridiculous. Yet here she was, a mere bookkeeper, suddenly entranced by a world that seemed just a page away, spilling its secrets like popcorn at a midnight movie marathon. With each turn of the page, Alara felt a tugging at her insecurities, like a relentless door-to-door salesman of doubt, always knocking at her mind. Who was she to think she could unravel the truths behind these grand tales? The village settled into a comfortable routine that enveloped her like a warm blanket by the fire, shielding her from the chill of the unknown. Outside, the wind howled softly, a ghostly murmur beckoning her to step beyond her self-imposed prison of timidness. Thoughts of the diary danced in her head like the sugar-high children after a birthday party, urging her to embark on her quest, not for medals or glory, but for something profoundly personal. Could she let go of her fears and embrace the unknown, like fumbling through the dark for the last slice of pizza? Alara's heart raced as she conjured images from the diary's pages, picturing herself wielding a sword, perhaps a butter knife, with all the conviction of a knight on a treacherous quest. What if she followed Actaeon's path, filled with the aroma of courage and the sharp stench of dragon's breath? She imagined herself climbing mountains, confronting fears that loomed like the towering peaks of the Rockies, and navigating ancient forests where every rustle of leaves told a story of adventure. The ordinary world around her faded into the background. Even Mrs. Brumfield's infamous fruitcake reputed to be more deadly than any villain, couldn't deter her burgeoning resolve. Yes, Ilara would seek the truth, yet she realized she also sought to discover herself, slowly. A puzzle piecing together from the dusty corners of both the diary and her own heart. Gathering her courage, Ilara closed her eyes for a moment, letting the thrill of the adventure wash over her, much like the finale of a blockbuster film, where the hero finally embraces their destiny. She could almost hear the crescendo of a symphony, urging her forward, igniting a fervor that had long lain dormant. With the diary clutched to her chest like a cherished secret, she stood up straight, her usual slouch morphing into a newfound stance of determination. Small tremors of excitement coursed through her, echoing every brave whim the heroine had ever penned. The village of Eldridge might have remained the sleepy, unassuming place it always was, but she, Ilara, was about to uncover not only the diary's truths, but also the fierce spirit within her that might surprise even the most faithful watchers of this unfolding saga. With the diary clutched tightly in her hands, Ilara felt a spark of destiny crackling in her chest. Each page whispered haunting secrets, daring her to plunge into the unknown that waited beyond her village's familiar borders. "It's now or never," she muttered, fighting the rising tide of trepidation as she stepped onto the uneven path leading to the forest of whispers. The forest loomed ahead, a tangle of ancient trees, their twisted branches clawing at the sky like spindly fingers. Agitated whispers floated through the air, a ghostly sound that could easily be mistaken for wind if one overlooked the shivers igniting the hairs on the back of her neck. Was that the scent of damp earth and wild mint? Or had she just lost her breakfast over the prospect of adventure? She inhaled deeply, steeling her resolve, and took her first real step into the realm of fairy tales and nightmares alike. As she ventured deeper into the woods, the forest transformed before her eyes, colors more vivid than any painter's palette. Sunlight danced between impossibly green leaves, casting quirky shadows that felt like the forest was alive and playing tricks on her mind. Just as the fear of being lunch for a mythical beast began creeping back in, she stumbled upon a clearing. There, standing under a gnarled tree that looked like it had fought 100 storms, was a figure with tousled hair and a lopsided grin, none other than Cashin, the self-proclaimed master of wandering. "Are you lost too, or just fashionably late to the party?" he quipped, his eyes dancing with mischief, making it clear this was no ordinary hero, but rather a comical sidekick in Ilara's burgeoning saga. She rolled her eyes, but couldn't suppress an amused snicker. Perhaps fate had a strange sense of humor after all. Together, they began to sift through the mysteries clawing at the edges of Ilara's mind, while unraveling the diary's cryptic clues. Guided by a blend of logic and whimsy, they followed an unmarked path, like a pair of eccentric treasure hunters, charting an improbable course through a world where every rustle held a secret. "So, what's the plan?" Cashin asked, arching an eyebrow as they crouched low to observe a parade of pixies winking cheerfully at them from a thick bush. Alara hesitated, her mind spun with dreams spun of grandeur, but words failed her. "Well, I was thinking we could." And before she could finish, a small creature resembling a mix between a raccoon and a cranky grandmother shouted, "No loud talking. You'll scare the good magic away." Their laughter echoed through the trees, a delightful symphony that seemed to coax the powers of this enchanted realm into revealing their secrets. As twilight draped the forest in an ethereal glow, Alara marveled at how the forest was both breathtaking and bewildering. Stars peeked through the leafy canopy, twinkling like the scatterings of her scattered thoughts, each one urging her to uncover the diary's ultimate truth. Yet with every twist and turn, doubt slivered into her heart. What if she wasn't meant for this adventure? Somewhere at the back of her mind, doubts gathered like a storm front. Cashin noticed her fidgeting, and with a flourish that only someone who had never practiced dramatic speeches would attempt, he declared, "Fear is just excitement in disguise." Though she felt far from courageous, his ridiculous cheerfulness became an unexpectedly comforting blanket against the chill of her growing uncertainties. With each secret spell they unearthed, a fragile bond blossomed between Alara and Cashin, a thread of understanding stitched with snickers and shared glances. They became partners in a game far bigger than themselves, drawing the magical and mundane into a tapestry that glittered with laughter, worry, and the thrill of the chase. Alara felt the weight of the diary lighten with every whimsical turn they took. Discovery flowed like the bubbling brooks nearby, rich and full of life. Perhaps being an unlikely heroine wasn't just about sword fights and dazzling rescues. She mused as they paused to catch their breaths. It could simply mean embracing the quirks of unexpected friendship and finding adventures in the unlikeliest of places. As the moon rose high, gleaming like a watchful eye, Alara knew deep in her heart that the true call to adventure had only just begun. The forest loomed like a living, breathing entity as Alara and Cashin stepped beneath its ancient canopy. Gnarled roots sprawled out like the fingers of slumbering giants, claiming the earth, while a fog clung to the underbrush, muffling their footfalls. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, tinged with the sharp, metallic undertone of danger that set Alara's heart hammering against her ribs. She cast a sideways glance at Cashin, who was scanning their surroundings with wide-eyed curiosity, as if he expected a wand-wielding, wizard to pop out from behind a tree if we encounter creatures from my favorite RPG. I'm totally calling dibs on the loot, he joked, his breath visible in the cool air, attempting to dispel the rising tension. But beneath that brave facade, Alara could see the flicker of fear mirrored in his eyes, and it only deepened her resolve to protect him. And the diary they had staked so much to find. As they ventured deeper, the shadows lengthened and the whispers of the forest took on a sinister tone, intertwining with the distant howls that echoed like the mournful cries of the lost. Alara's thoughts kept darting back to the shadowy figure they had seen just days ago, a malevolent presence that seemed to seep into the very roots of the forest, eager to claim the secrets safeguarded within her diary. Suddenly, a rustle broke the stillness, a chilling sound that sent a shiver cascading down her spine. Out of the underbrush lunged a beast, its shimmering eyes like twin moons shining through the veil of night. Alara's instincts kicked in, and she grabbed Cashin's arm, her voice a fierce whisper. Run. In that moment, adrenaline surged, binding them together in a rush of shared terror as they sprinted through the trees, an odd comedy of limbs and exhilaration, narrowly escaping the jaws of fate. They stumbled into a small clearing, illuminated by the pale light of the moon, where the ground was carpeted with a kaleidoscope of wildflowers that clashed with the ominous mood. Alara took a moment to breathe, a trickle of sweat mingling with the dirt on her brow, when suddenly a wailing echo split the air, a cacophony of anguished cries conjured by the forest's darker magics. Flashes of lights danced around them, forming haunting shapes that flickered in the corners of their vision, pulling at their sanity like childlike pranks. Are those spirits, or just the forest attempting to win the most dramatic backdrop award? Cashin quipped with a nervous chuckle, though it did little to mask the trembling in his voice. The illusions seemed all too real. They were a reminder that confronting their fears was no longer a quaint tale. It was a matter of life and death, one that made Alara's grip on the diary tighten like a lifeline in the storm. Yet, just when despair threatened to choke their resolve, Alara felt a flicker of defiance igniting within her. She remembered the words scribbled in the diary of heroes facing insurmountable odds, of laughter ringing through darkness, and of courage found in the most unlikely places. Gathering her wits, she seized a nearby branch, brandishing it like a sword, channeling the spirit of every great hero she ever admired. Back off, you spooky shadows, she shouted, her voice echoing with newfound ferocity, shaking off the grip of fear. Cashin looked at her, eyes wide, and despite the looming danger, he couldn't suppress a grin, caught off guard by her unexpected bravery. Little did he know, Alara's heart raced not out of fear, but out of sheer exhilaration. A hero was emerging in her as much as it was in the tales she had cherished. But deep down, the looming threat of the shadowy figure hung over them like a dark cloud, chilling the air with each passing heartbeat. As they steadied themselves after the tumult, whispers floated like ghostly tendrils, a chilling reminder that they were not entirely alone. The figure, cloaked in darkness, was still seeking them, drawn to the diary's potent legacy, relentless as a bad sequel to a cult classic. Alara sensed it, a tangible weight in the back of her mind, a premonition of the confrontation that loomed ahead. As they prepared to move on, she glanced sideways at Cashin, their eyes locking in unwavering determination. Both young souls steeling for the next chapter of their journey, heartbeats synchronized against the thrumming chaos of the dark, aware that the path ahead would demand every ounce of strength they possessed. As the chilling wind howled through the desolate landscape, Alara found herself standing face to face with the shadowy figure that had haunted her dreams. His dark form loomed ominously against the crimson sunset, a living nightmare clad in tattered rags that smelled faintly of decay and something else, perhaps the lingering scent of lost hopes. Alara's heart raced, pounding like a drum echoing in an otherwise silent chamber. But it was not just fear that surged through her veins. She could feel the diary, warm against her chest, whispering tales of bravery and flickering courage. With every heartbeat, she tapped into the stories of the heroines before her, their voices rising like a choir in her mind, urging her to stand tall, to not become just another victim of the darkness that threatened to envelop her. With newfound resolve, Alara gripped the diary tightly, its pages trembling in response, as if the very essence of those words, long penned now, surged with electric potential. What was once a simple notebook was transforming before her eyes, radiating a glow that illuminated her otherwise timid features. The words woven into the fabric of its pages were no longer mere text. They morphed into a tapestry of strength that wrapped around her like a comforting embrace. As the shadow lunged towards her, its eyes glinting with malicious intent, Alara unleashed the words of the diary, letting them spill forth like a cascading waterfall of light. Those words carried the weight of her fears, transforming them into sharp arrows that flew straight and true, piercing the heavy veil of darkness that shrouded her enemy. The battle raged like a storm, thunderclaps echoing across the battleground, as Alara's heart swelled with the ferocity of a lion's roar. She moved not with hesitation, but with the grace of someone who had spent too long in the shadows, finally stepping into the light. The air crackled with magic. It was intoxicating, a sweet mix of fear and exhilaration swirling around her like smoke from a delicious barbecue on summer evenings. One could almost taste the victory in the air if it weren't for the stench of despair still lurking nearby. Each confrontation with the shadowy figure felt like a dance, one risky, unrehearsed exchange after another. Both of them locked in a rhythmic pattern between dread and defiance. Alara had become the very embodiment of the bravery she had always admired, wielding not just words, but the core of her being, fierce and unyielding. But just when it seemed victory was in reach, the shadow mocked her. Its voice, a chilling echo rattling through her mind, like the laugh of a long-ago villain, straight from a forgotten fairy tale. You think your words can change fate, it scoffed, as if taunting a childhood cartoon hero standing at the coils of a villain's lair. Alara hesitated, doubt creeping in like an unwelcome guest to the grandest of parties, threatening to ruin the nice spread of courage she'd laid out. Yet at that moment, she remembered the heart of the diary, the truth that stories are not just ink on pages, but powerful spells that can transform fear into a beacon of hope. And she laughed. As a matter of fact, I do, she shouted, cheeks tinged with joy and defiance, channeling both her inner hero and every epic moment she'd ever witnessed on screen, drawing upon the whispers of all the strong women penned within the diary's pages. Alara surged forward, her voice rising above the cacophony of battle, mingling with the gusts of wind and the flickers of shadows. With each incantation, a dazzling brilliance erupted from the pages, illuminating the night as if the stars themselves had joined her fight. The shadow recoiled, its power shrinking like an ice cube melting in the sun. In that exhilarating moment, triumph throbbed in her chest, pulsing with the rhythm of victory. The sweet scent of success mixed with the slight tang of fear, born of facing the unknown. A sense of awe washed over her, for she had become the true heroine of her story, a warrior unafraid, adorned not by armor, but by the tales of courage that would outlast any darkness. With the echoes of victory still ringing in her ears, Alara stepped into the sunlight, her heart pounding like a war drum. The air, thick with the scent of freshly turned earth and blooming wildflowers, felt alive around her. She imagined how the village had once cringed at her presence, but now she was a beacon of hope. The shadows of doubt that loomed over her were vanquished, replaced by the blazing conviction that she could mold her destiny. It was as if she'd slipped out of the chrysalis of uncertainty and emerged as a radiant butterfly, or at least a rather bold moth flapping towards the light, ready to take on the world with a wink and a giggle at the absurdity of it all. Beside her, Cashin stood with a grin that could rival the sun itself, his eyes gleaming with admiration and mischief. Alara felt his unwavering support like a warm cup of tea on a stormy day. Together, they watched as the villagers gathered, still wearing expressions of disbelief and awe, or perhaps they were just wondering where they had put their pitchforks and torches. But instead of chasing away the hero with torches this time, they embraced Alara with open arms, their cheers resonating through the cobbled streets like a victorious anthem that would make even the most bustling Broadway crowd green with envy. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows upon the village, Alara felt the weight of the diary nestled in her satchel, like a treasure chest bursting with tales waiting to be told. Amidst the aroma of bread baking in the evening air, she started to unravel the fabric of her stories of bravery, of laughter that bubbled up like a spring, and moments when fear felt like a gnarly beast ready to pounce. "Gather around," she called out, remembering how once upon a time she might have quaked at the prospect. But now, armed with her triumphs, she stood fearless, a storyteller ready to weave a tapestry of courage that could ignite the hearts of even the weariest souls. The square filled with eager faces, their anticipation palpable, like the breath before a belly laugh. With every word Alara spoke, they leaned in closer, her narratives wrapping around them like a warm, cozy blanket on a frosty night. Laughter erupted at the tales of mischief and folly, while gasps punctuated the stories of peril that once lurked in the darkest corners of her life. Each tale resonated with threads of courage and friendship, igniting sparks of determination within those who listened. It was a motley crew of villagers, some clutching squawking chickens, others holding on to rambunctious children. Yet every single one of them found solace in her words, transporting them from mundane chores to colorful quests. As the stars twinkled above like a protective army, Alara knew that this was just the beginning of something beautiful. The villagers no longer regarded her as an unlikely heroine, but as one of their own, a true champion whose journey was woven into the very fabric of their community. They crafted new stories together, tales of triumph against adversity and adventures that would make even the most daring of knights chuckle in disbelief. In a world where darkness once threatened to overshadow their lives, Alara's legacy sparked a fire of camaraderie to light their way forward, and with a knowing smile, she realized happily ever after wasn't just a phrase in a fairy tale. It was an ever-evolving story that they would pen together, page by thrilling page, in the heart of a quaint Italian village, where the sun sips lazily on the horizon, and the scent of ripe olives lingers in the air like a familiar friend. Isabella sat at her rickety wooden table, the kind you'd expect to see in a classic Italian movie. Her fingers danced delicately over the faded parchment, as if she were caressing the very essence of her memories. Each stroke of the quill unleashed torrential waves of nostalgia, with images of Marco flooding her mind. She could almost hear his infectious laughter echoing through the cobbled streets, a symphony of warmth breaking through the chill of separation. Every memory was a sweet note, yet each also struck a dissonant chord with the reality of his absence. The olive trees outside her window whispered tales of love lost and hope untouched, their gnarled branches reaching like desperate hands toward the horizon. Isabella's heart swelled with bittersweet pangs as she recalled their stolen moments beneath those very trees, oftentimes trying to avoid the curious stares of the nosy villagers who seemed to have a sixth sense for spotting young love. Oh, how they had laughed in the face of societal expectations, swatting away the prying eyes like pesky flies at a summer picnic, believing that their love could conquer anything, even the vast ocean that now lay between them. The irony struck her. Marco had left these sun-kissed shores for the concrete jungle of America, trading the gentle lull of the sea for the cacophony of city sirens. Yet still, her heart beat for him like a metronome of longing, perfectly out of time with the world around her. With handmade ink pooling on the edge of her quill, Isabella poured her heart into words, forming sentences heavy with the weight of unspoken feelings. The cultural divides felt like thick, impenetrable borders, much like the ones she imagined stenciled on a soccer field, restraining yet enticing. Italian pride clashed with the foreignness of Marco's new life, leaving her in a whirlpool of emotions: fear, envy, hope, and an overwhelming urge to stamp her foot and shout, "Stupid America, why must you snatch him away?" Irony dripped from her pen as she realized that Marco's pursuit of opportunity felt like a betrayal tangled with love's sweet embrace. Did he ever truly know the depth of her longing? Or had ambition dulled the vibrant colors of their shared dreams? As she sealed the letter with a touch of rose-scented wax, a small smile crept onto Isabella's lips, despite the tumult raging within her heart. It was as if the very act of writing had wrapped her in a warm blanket, a momentary escape from the chill of loss. But nothing could fill the void left by Marco's absence. She pictured him standing in some chic coffee shop in New York, sipping an espresso that could never capture the essence of Italian sun. There he was, a brooding figure surrounded by suits and skyscrapers, probably missing the taste of homemade pasta and the warmth of his mother's kitchen. Her love felt like a superhero, swooping through the distances, but only ever managing to give her a light peck on the cheek, just enough to keep her dreaming. And so, with every flick of her pen, Isabella reaffirmed this unyielding connection that transcended oceans and cultures. Outside, the village was waking, noisy children competing with the melodious clamor of roosters heralding the dawn. She knew her letter would sail across the cobalt sea, each word an anchor tethering her heart to Marco, reminding him of home. As she released the sealed letter into the world, she felt a shiver of hope. Perhaps one day they would write a new chapter together, where distance was but a fleeting concept, like that awful sci-fi movie where time travelers battle an evil empire. With a heart that fluttered like the wings of a love-struck dove, Isabella whispered into the winds, "Come back to me, my dear Marco, for our story has only just begun." As Isabella sat at her worn wooden table, ink pooling on the parchment before her, a weighty silence enveloped her heart. She eagerly awaited a response from Marco, her letters swirling in a void of unanswered hopes, each one more desperate than the last. The scent of simmering garlic and tomatoes wafted through the air, a mockery of her blooming worries. Outside, the streets of her little Italian village thrummed with life, bustling with neighbors celebrating the harvest, while she remained paralyzed by the absence of Marco's words. Maybe, just maybe, he'd climb the hill and knock on her door. But instead, the echo of her loneliness seemed louder than ever, wrapping itself around her like a second skin. And oh, how she longed for a sign, a breadcrumb leading her back to his embrace amidst the cacophony of distance. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, Marco found himself churning in the relentless currents of New York City, a place where dreams danced alongside despair like frenemies at a high school reunion. The air buzzed with a cocktail of exhaust fumes and street food aromas that flirted with his senses, beckoning him toward that blissful escape of a hot dog, but a good one, with mustard and onions, not the kind that left you questioning your life choices. Each day, he donned his worn work boots and faced a battleground of unyielding labor, where the gruff laughter of fellow immigrants masked their shared struggles. After toiling through sweat-drenched hours, he'd whisper her name with each exhale, his breath mingling with the rich, earthy scents of the city, as if hoping she could hear him across the ocean. In the heart of this concrete jungle, prejudice loomed like an unwanted shadow. Yet, even in those moments, he found strength in the flicker of hope, an unwavering belief that their love could bridge any chasm. Oh, the irony. Here lay Marco, surrounded by the towering steel giants of ambition. Yet he felt smaller than the tiniest pixel on one of those massive billboards plastered with far-off fantasies. Every face in the crowd told a story, each one a tapestry woven from dreams and dashed hopes. Vendors shouted their wares in a symphony of languages, blending cultures like a mismatched cocktail that made you wince at first, but slowly grew on you, like that one song you hum at 3 a.m. while peering into the abyss of your life's choices. Through this vibrant chaos, immigrant life unfolded, each day painted with the hues of resilience and frustration that had become Marco's reality. His laughter echoed off the grimy brick walls, a stark contrast to the dreams of his future with Isabella, the sweet girl from the sun-kissed hills of home. But the question wound like a stubborn vine around Marco's heart. Was their love strong enough to defy the life that had set them on diverging paths? Each passing day felt like a thrilling, yet haunted episode of a soap opera, packed with melodramatic twists. He longed for the soft, reassuring sound of Isabella's laughter, which danced like sunlight over the rippling surface of a lake, soothing the turmoil within him. Instead, the city offered a soundtrack of clattering subway trains and distant sirens that screamed frustration and urgency, an uninvited reminder of the world that spun around him, while his heart remained anchored in memories of Isabella. Despite life's challenges, he scribbled her name in the dusty corners of his mind, a mantra that ignited his spirit like a spark in a darkened room. Back in Italy, as Isabella continued to pour her soul onto the pages, each line dripped with a bittersweet sting, a potent cocktail of longing and despair that would leave even the strongest soul feeling a little woozy. The scent of freshly baked bread wafted in from the bakery down the street, a grounding reminder of the mundane comforts that filled her days. Notwithstanding her heart's void, with every word she wrote, tears blurred her vision, a spirited rebellion against the oppressive silence that marked her correspondence with Marco. She imagined him walking through the door, arms wide open, sweeping her into a whirlwind of unfiltered affection. But every day they lost to the chasm of geography felt like an unrelenting fight against the tides of time. Love, even one as passionate as theirs, was fast becoming a marooned ship, beating against the unforgiving waves of reality, while they remained a world apart, tethered only by paper and ink. Isabella had never hated the smell of roses until that moment. The sweet, cloying fragrance wafted through the air from the garden outside her window, a stark contrast to the storm brewing within her heart. Arranged marriages were as welcome as a skunk at a garden party, and her parents were blissfully unaware as they chatted about wedding plans. With her pulse racing faster than a New York subway during rush hour, Isabella felt her dreams of love slipping through her fingers like grains of sand. What must it be like to be trapped in a gilded cage, she wondered, where every bar sparkled but held you not in luxury, but in despair. As the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long, dramatic shadows across her tiny room, she grabbed her quill and a piece of parchment, knowing she needed to scream out her heart. And this time, it would be for Marco alone. With her ink flowing like a river of emotion, Isabella poured her soul into the letter. Each stroke of the quill a heartbeat, racing against time. She recalled every secret smile and stolen kiss, the memory of Marco's laughter wrapping around her like a cherished old sweater, warm, but just a bit scratchy around the edges. Where were the mountains and oceans that could keep them apart? If love could leap across continents like a superhero, then hers could certainly hurdle a few family expectations. She scribbled furiously, vowing to chase him from the rolling hills of Italy to the bustling streets of New York City, pledging a love so fierce it could ignite the coldest of worlds. Each word dripped with longing, each sentence a promise that this wouldn't just be another tragedy in their love story. It was a commitment, a battle cry against the fate her family had laid out for her. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit flat across the ocean, Marco was a man on a midnight mission, sorting through letters that had piled up like laundry in a neglectful bachelor's home. The smell of old parchment and the bittersweet scent of faded ink wafted through the air, mixing with the aroma of his meager dinner, leftover pasta that had seen better days. As he unfolded Isabella's letters, the weight of her words crashed over him like a tidal wave, dragging him back to summers spent running barefoot through golden fields, hearts racing as fast as their feet. Each letter was a bridge spanning the chasm of their separation, reigniting the embers of hope that had threatened to turn to ash. With each new declaration of love, he felt himself pulled closer to her like a moth to a flame, electricity crackling in the air. The temptation to return to her becoming a spell he couldn't resist. A sly grin crept across his face, buoyed by an unstoppable tide of determination. "I'll be back, my dear," he whispered, emboldened as if he were a knight donning his armor for yet another quest for love. But had anyone ever warned Marco that the journey home would be as fraught with peril as a poorly planned road trip? The very thought of returning to the embrace of Isabella brought forth a chaotic mix of excitement and anxiety, each feeling wrestling for dominance like two rival superheroes in an epic showdown. He imagined her face lighting up with joy and a hint of disbelief. What kind of madman would leap across an ocean for love? He brushed a hand through his disheveled hair, realizing that he was that madman. The world outside his window seemed dull by comparison, and he longed for the warmth of her presence to relieve the chill of isolation that hung over him like a thick fog. Take that arranged marriage, he thought, with a smirk that could rival James Bond's legendary charm. As the sun began to rise on another day, both lovers were draped in determination, their destinies intertwined like the twist of a double helix, forming the very fabric of possibility. Isabella's heart raced with every new stroke of her quill, while Marco, clutching her letters, felt his feet itching to find their way back to her. The threads of connection, woven from love and laced with longing, were strong, and neither would let go without a fight. The world might have conspired against them, but they were armed with hope and the conviction to leap into the unknown like a pair of Star Wars rebels, ready to forge their own destiny in a world that sometimes felt as restrictive as a Victorian corset. They both understood the power and potency of love that defied boundaries, and this time they would not let it fade into the shadows. In the swirling chaos of the New York docks, Isabella stood, her heart pounding like a bongo drum at a samba party. The scent of salt and fish mingled with the damp smell of the approaching storm, creating a cocktail of adrenaline and anxiety. She had risked everything: her family's disapproval, her old life in Portugal, and most importantly, her heart, for a chance to reunite with Marco. With rain-specked hair clinging to her cheeks and her teeth chattering not from the cold but from sheer determination, she whispered to herself, "For love, I would dance in a hurricane." Who knew that the love stories of old could lead to a real-life romantic thriller, complete with stormy weather and questionable decisions? Yet there she was, ready to brave the tempest for the man who had stolen her heart like a rogue thief at a midnight masquerade ball. Meanwhile, across the docks, Marco was no less perturbed. The wind howled, whipping his clothes about him like a rebellious flag. He had taken a train, hopped on a bus, and even attempted to charm a taxi driver, all just to stand here. Fate's cruel joke presented itself as the dark clouds rolled in and the rain began its relentless descent. It smelled of wet asphalt and desperation, a concoction not at all ideal for a love-struck Italian. But he held onto a photograph of Isabella, frayed at the edges, her smiling face across time and space. What is a little inclement, whether compared to this mighty love? He thought, unsurprised to have to summon the spirit of Rocky Balboa just to keep running forward, no matter how slippery the road ahead became. As the storm intensified, the heavens cracked open, splattering the cobblestones like a painter on a caffeinated bender. The tumultuous waves roared as if Poseidon himself had descended to taunt the lover's quest. Dockworkers shouted above the cacophony, their voices mingling with the splash of water and the slap of heavy rain against tarpaulin-covered crates. A ship's horn blared, a guttural call that echoed the very heartbeat of New York, thrumming, raw and alive. It was chaos, pure and powerful, and yet Isabella felt an odd intimacy with it. knowing that somewhere in the midst of this whirlwind, Marco would be looking for her. No calamity could drown the fire that flickered in her chest, ignited by possibility and yearning, an unquenchable spark. Even in this downpour, stumbling through the downpour, Isabella's heart raced faster than the trains she had taken to flee her past. If I don't find him now, will I be swept away, lost to the tides of fate like misplaced luggage? She mused, clutching her shawl around herself and squinting against the relentless wind. It felt absurd, almost like they were characters in a soap opera, one so dramatic it could have been written by a fifth grader with a flair for the melodramatic. But this was no fiction, this was their reality. With every misstep on the slick docks, she resolved that love was indeed the ultimate risk. No storm, however treacherous, would pry her from her destiny. And lo and behold, as if summoned by the gods of romance, she spotted a familiar figure braving the torrential winds. Hope wrapped around her like a warm embrace. In that moment, where rain blurred the lines between desperation and joy, Marco saw her, his Isabella, radiant even in a sodden dress that clung to her like an awkward prom date. She was a beacon amidst the downpour, an icon of love in this aquatic battlefield. With a laugh that reverberated like a pop rock anthem from their youth, he called out, "Here I am to save the day, or at least to borrow a towel." Love had pushed through the storm, past the barriers they had both known too well: distance, family, and doubt. This reunion was not just a triumph, it was the reminder that love, particularly a love as powerful as theirs, is worth every risk, even those that come with a strong chance of getting soaked. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple like a painter gone rogue, Isabella stood at the bustling port, her heart a chaotic symphony of hope and anxiety. The roiling sea, with its salt-kissed air, whispered secrets of distant lands as she clutched a tattered letter in her hands, the ink smeared from years of tugging at her heartstrings. The moment she spotted Marco's silhouette against the twilight, a warmth surged through her, rivaling the day's fading warmth. Their love had survived the treacherous waters of time and tradition, two sturdy ships navigating through stormy seas, ever determined to find each other again, just like in a rom-com where the leading pair finally meets at an airport, albeit with fewer baggage handlers and more emotional baggage. Isabella felt a mixture of laughter and crying urge to spill from her heart. With every step that Marco took, Isabella could hear the echo of their shared laughter, the funny inside jokes that felt like oxygen in her lungs. When they finally collided in a fierce embrace, it was as if they were the last two survivors of a shipwreck, clinging desperately to one another amidst a world that had been so keen on pulling them apart. The scent of him earthy, like fresh rain on sun-baked soil, brought memories flooding back like an overflowing river. A cascade of promises whispered under old oak trees. They'd spent years apart under indifferent skies, her in a land of struggle and dreams, him in a realm where love had been a luxury too costly to afford. But against all odds, their reunion cradled the spark of a future bright enough to burn through any fog of uncertainty they faced. Standing together, the echoes of their past danced like fireflies in the twilight, illuminating the crevices of their hearts that had been shadowed by time. They spoke in hushed tones, sharing stories of sacrifice and longing, filling the gaps left by absence like a master mosaic artist reclaiming lost pieces. Marco recounted the hilarious misadventures of his attempts to cook Italian pasta. Imagine a culinary version of an accident-prone superhero. Spillage everywhere, and smoke alarms blaring. Isabella could only laugh, her heart swelling with the knowledge that they had both battled their respective demons. Yet here they stood, stronger for it. The irony was not lost on them. Amidst the madness of life, their love was a constant, a lighthouse guiding them home through turbulent waters. As night draped its velvet cloak over the world, the pair trekked towards the quieter, star-speckled edge of the port, engulfed in the serenity of a newfound home. Together, the air was rich with the scent of grilled fish and spices wafting from nearby stalls, a spicy undertone that mirrored the excitement bubbling between them. Sitting side by side on a weather-beaten bench, they began to weave plans as intricate as any tapestry, envisioning a life that fulfilled promises and dared to embrace the wild unknown. They spoke of the home they would build, a sanctuary painted with shared traditions, yet sprinkled with bright, new adventures, like the colorful confetti thrown in the air during joyous celebrations. In that moment, their hearts swelled with the dreams of 1,000 sunrise mornings spent side by side, each one declaring that love transcends boundaries more audacious than the plot twists in a daytime soap opera. Filled with renewed purpose, they shared a laughter that would echo across the ages, a sound rich with the beauty of unbroken connection. And all the cherry blossoms of regret that had bloomed along the way. Marco playfully teased Isabella about her stubbornness, likening it to a fierce Italian nonna determined to make the perfect lasagna, while she shot back with the playful barb of her own, likening him to a wanderer who lost his compass in Coney Island. Yet amid the banter, they knew their past was a rich tapestry of chaos, resilience, and fierce love, a wild adventure they were ready to continue. As they sank into the embrace of the night, neither star nor tide could erode what they had built. Their hearts beat in unison, promising a lifetime of challenges, and more importantly, laughter, shared joy, and love that stood tall against the wretched waves of the world. Home, they discovered, wasn't just a place. It was the warmth wrapped in their arms, their shared laughter, and the unapologetic defiance of a world that had tried to keep them apart.